The year was 1920. America was roaring. Jazz-filled smoky speakeasies. The air was thick with the sound of trumpets and saxophones, the rhythm of the drums and the clinking of glasses. It was a time of celebration, of breaking free from the past and embracing the new. Flappers danced, their laughter echoing in the night. They wore short skirts and bobbed their hair, defying the conventions of their mothers and grandmothers. They were the embodiment of the roaring 20s, a symbol of freedom and rebellion. But beneath the glitz and glamour, a darker force was stirring. The bright lights of the city cast long shadows, and in those shadows, danger lurked. The night was alive with the whispers of secrets and the rustle of illicit deals. Prohibition had descended upon the nation, turning ordinary citizens into thirsty criminals. The Volstead Act had made the manufacture, sale and transportation of alcohol illegal, but it did little to quench the public's thirst. Instead, it drove the trade underground, into the hands of those willing to break the law. This created the perfect opportunity. An opportunity for those with ambition and a willingness to take risks. The underworld saw a chance to profit from the nation's desire for a drink, and they seized it with both hands. A chance for ambitious gangsters to seize control. They formed alliances, made deals, and carved out territories. They were ruthless and cunning, willing to do whatever it took to get ahead. The streets of New York City, a melting pot of dreams and desperation, were about to become a battleground. Immigrants from all over the world had come to the city in search of a better life, but for many, the American dream was out of reach. The underworld offered an alternative, a way to make money and gain power. Among the shadows and dimly lit alleys, a new breed of criminal was emerging. They were not content with petty theft or small-time scams. They had bigger ambitions, and they were willing to do whatever it took to achieve them. These were not common thugs or petty thieves. They were organized. They were disciplined. They had a code of conduct and a hierarchy. They were more like a corporation than a gang, with a clear structure and a defined set of rules. They were bound by blood and tradition. Loyalty was everything, and betrayal was met with swift and brutal punishment. They were a family, in every sense of the word. They were the Mafia, and they were here to stay. They had roots that went back to the old country, to Sicily and Naples, and they brought with them a way of life that was both ancient and ruthless. New York, with its teeming harbor and endless opportunities, was ripe for exploitation. The city's bustling ports and busy streets provided the perfect cover for their operations. They smuggled in alcohol, ran speakeasies, and bribed officials to look the other way. The five families, each vying for power and wealth, carved up the city like a stolen pie. They divided the territory among themselves, each controlling their own piece of the underworld. But the peace was fragile, and tensions were always simmering just below the surface. Turf wars erupted in bloody violence. The struggle for control was fierce, and the streets ran red with blood. Gangsters fought for dominance, and no one was safe from the crossfire. Innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. The violence spilled over into the lives of ordinary citizens, who found themselves caught up in a war they didn't understand. Fear and uncertainty became a part of daily life. It was the beginning of a reign of terror that would last for decades. The Mafia's grip on the city tightened and their influence spread. They infiltrated businesses, unions, and even the government, becoming a shadowy power that controlled much of the city's life. And at the heart of it all, waiting for their moment, were the Gambinos. They were one of the most powerful families, and their rise to power would be marked by cunning, ruthlessness, and a relentless drive for control. The stage was set for a new era of organized crime, and the Gambinos were ready to take their place at the top. The roots of the Mafia ran deep, stretching back to the sun-baked island of Sicily. Centuries of poverty and oppression had bred a code of silence, of loyalty, of ruthless efficiency. This code, known as omerta, would become the bedrock of their criminal empire. The first wave of Italian immigrants brought this hidden world to America's shores. They found themselves marginalized, discriminated against, forced to the fringes of society. In this environment, the Mafia offered protection, opportunity, and a twisted sense of belonging. Early Mafia activities centered around extortion, loan sharking, and illegal gambling. They preyed on their own, exploiting the desperation of their community. But as their power grew, so did their ambition. They infiltrated labor unions, controlled politicians, and infiltrated legitimate businesses. The rise of the Mafia was a story of ambition, ruthlessness, and the corrupting influence of power. It was a story that would be told in whispers, in fear, and in the blood spilled on the streets of New York, and no family would embody this story more than the Gambinos. Carlo Gambino was not a man to be underestimated. Born in Palermo, Sicily in 1902, he was steeped in the traditions of the Mafia from a young age. By the time he immigrated to the United States in 1921, he was already well versed in the codes of silence and loyalty that would define his life. Quiet, calculating, and utterly ruthless, Gambino quickly rose through the ranks of the American Mafia. He was a master manipulator who understood the levers of power, always preferring to pull strings from behind the scenes rather than seek the spotlight. He was a master manipulator who understood the levers of power. His ability to read people and situations allowed him to navigate the treacherous waters of organized crime with unparalleled skill. He preferred strategy over brute force, knowing that true control came from influence and fear. Gambino's approach was methodical. He would often spend months, even years, planning his moves, ensuring that every detail was accounted for. In 1957, after a bloody power struggle, Gambino seized control of what would become the most powerful mafia family in America. The infamous Appalachian meeting, where law enforcement disrupted a gathering of mafia leaders, marked a turning point. Gambino used the chaos to his advantage, outmaneuvering his rivals and solidifying his position at the top. He consolidated his power, forging alliances and eliminating rivals with cold-blooded efficiency. Gambino was known for his ability to build strong networks, both within the criminal underworld and in legitimate circles. He understood that power was not just about muscle, but also about connections and influence. His reign marked the beginning of a new era for the Gambinos, one of unprecedented wealth and influence. Under his leadership, the family expanded its operations, delving into new and more profitable ventures. Gambino understood the changing face of crime. He was always one step ahead, anticipating shifts in law enforcement tactics and market opportunities. This foresight allowed him to adapt and thrive in an ever-evolving landscape. He shifted the family's focus to more lucrative ventures: drug trafficking, construction racketeering, and infiltration of legitimate businesses. These new avenues not only brought in immense profits but also provided a veneer of respectability that shielded the family from scrutiny and infiltration of legitimate businesses. Gambino's ability to blend the illicit with the legitimate made him a formidable force, respected and feared by both allies and adversaries. He ran his empire like a Fortune 500 company, demanding absolute loyalty and punishing betrayal with swift and brutal retribution. His leadership style was a mix of benevolence and terror. Those who served him well were rewarded handsomely, while those who crossed him met with a grim fate. Under Carlo's leadership, the Gambino family reached its zenith. They controlled vast swaths of New York's economy, from the docks to the construction sites, and their influence extended into politics and law enforcement. They were the undisputed kings of New York, their tentacles reaching into every corner of the city and beyond. Gambino's name became synonymous with power and control, a legacy built on a foundation of fear and respect. But their success would sow the seeds of their own destruction, as a new generation, hungry for power and eager for the limelight, waited in the wings. The very strategies that had brought them to the pinnacle of power would eventually lead to their downfall, as internal strife and external pressures mounted. The Gambino family's influence seeped into every facet of New York City life. From the bustling streets of Manhattan to the quieter corners of the outer boroughs, their presence was felt everywhere. They were not just a criminal organization, they were a shadow government pulling strings behind the scenes and dictating the flow of money and power. They controlled construction unions, dictating which companies got contracts and how much they paid. This control allowed them to siphon off millions of dollars from public and private projects. They had their hands in every major construction project, ensuring that their chosen companies got the lucrative contracts while others were left out in the cold. They skimmed millions from public works projects, leaving behind shoddy buildings and compromised infrastructure. The cityscape was dotted with their handiwork, buildings that looked impressive from the outside but were structurally unsound. This not only endangered lives but also drained public resources that could have been used for genuine improvements. Their grip on the docks was absolute. They controlled the flow of goods in and out of the city, extorting businesses and manipulating prices. The docks were a critical point of entry for goods, and the Gambinos made sure that nothing moved without their say-so. This control extended to the workers as well. who had to pay for the privilege of keeping their jobs. They controlled the flow of goods in and out of the city, extorting businesses and manipulating prices. Businesses that refused to play by their rules found their shipments delayed or lost, costing them millions. The Gambinos' control over the docks allowed them to manipulate the market, driving up prices and creating artificial shortages to maximize their profits. Smuggled goods, from cigarettes to narcotics, flowed freely under the watchful eyes of corrupt officials. The Gambinos had a network of corrupt officials who turned a blind eye to their smuggling operations. This allowed them to flood the market with contraband, further enriching themselves while undermining legitimate businesses. The rise of the drug trade in the 1970s provided the Gambinos with another lucrative revenue stream. As the demand for drugs skyrocketed, the Gambinos were quick to capitalize. They established connections with international drug cartels, ensuring a steady supply of heroin and cocaine. They became major players in the heroin and cocaine markets, flooding the streets with addictive substances and leaving a trail of broken lives in their wake. The drugs they supplied devastated communities, leading to a surge in crime and addiction. Families were torn apart, and entire neighborhoods were plunged into despair. The Gambinos were at the height of their power, but their empire was built on a foundation of violence and corruption. Their rise to power was marked by brutal turf wars and ruthless eliminations of rivals. They ruled through fear, ensuring that anyone who dared to oppose them was swiftly dealt with. Their wealth came at the expense of countless lives ruined by addiction, extortion, and fear. The human cost of their empire was staggering. People lived in constant fear of retribution, knowing that a single misstep could lead to violence or worse. The Gambinos' reign of terror left an indelible mark on the city. And as the family grew richer, the attention they attracted from law enforcement grew more intense. The authorities were well aware of the Gambinos' activities, but bringing them to justice was no easy task. The family had deep connections and a sophisticated network that made it difficult to gather evidence. However, the relentless efforts of law enforcement would eventually lead to cracks in their seemingly invincible facade.